Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Tuesday afternoon Southern California housing market update. My name is Stephen Meade with Domicile real estate for people who love houses and also for people who love tracking the market. I want to talk a little bit about inflation and what that means for housing prices. So we've actually added something kind of to our repertoire of charts. I think I talked about this last week that we were going to try to work on adding an inflation trend line, an indexed inflation trend line to our housing affordability index. And we have done that, so we will get into that. But one of the things I want to talk about that I think is very timely is understanding that, inflation as a whole, meaning when you take the whole basket of goods that people do, inflation is not wildly volatile typically. We're kind of in a little bit of strange times, but even if you look at this, it's a pretty smooth chart in general over time, unlike say gas prices or house prices. And believe it or not, housing costs and gas prices have a lot in common. And the thing that they have in common that I think is important to understand is this notion of price elasticity, or rather, in the case of both gasoline and housing costs. And when I say housing, I mean both purchased for sale housing as well as rental housing. These goods are somewhat inelastic in their consumption. And that means that not only does their consumption not really change a whole lot based on market conditions, believe it or not, even though gas has gone up significantly in price, the consumption of gasoline has not gone down by that much. So not only are these goods price inelastic, meaning that the demand and the consumption doesn't change that much relative to pricing, they also tend to not have consumption move that quickly. There is a lot of work for businesses and for habits to realign around different gas consumption, right? There are ways to save on fuel. You can carpool, you can buy a more fuel efficient vehicle. None of these are very quick market responses. And housing really is the same way. Yes, people can become roommates. Yes, people can move to different areas, though nationally, I don't know if that really helps you very much in this case. But these kinds of things take time. So it means that our housing market often responds more slowly when prices and when the actual cost of housing, by cost, I mean that payment, that monthly amount that someone has to pay for a median priced home, that the market can't respond that quickly to that, especially when we are in a situation of being woefully undersupplied on housing as we are in Southern California. So let's jump into the stats and talk a little bit about what's going on a more granular level. So give me a second here. Okay, total active listings. Again, I think we are going to change how we do this a little bit to kind of indicate different market segments. $1 million is not quite what it used to be when we started tracking this. To kind of clean up our charts, we've actually eliminated any data that is older than a year. So if you notice down here, we're going 3/30/2021 to 3/29/2022. And if you look here, even if you make the argument that some of these under $1 million houses are now in the $1 to $2 million category, the problem we have is that when you add these two together for total active listings, meaning all the listings between $0 and $2 million, it doesn't add up to the total amount that we had a year ago. And that is very problematic for a market that still has very strong demand. So even if that demand to purchase goes down a little bit, and part of the reason it's not going down by a lot is that rents are also going up tremendously, right? And the relative demand of buying housing versus renting housing is not changing as much as maybe we'd like it to. So you're kind of seeing buyers say, well, housing just costs more. Yet we don't have any more real inventory to show for it when we look across the price segments. Now, if we jump ahead here and we look at new listings coming up on the market, again, we kind of have a similar problem. So yes, our 1 to 2 million category is a little bit higher than it was last year. Maybe last year it was 1,200 and this year it's 1,300. So 100 more listings came on in that 1 to 2 million. Look at where we are under a million. We are down, I mean, gosh, 800 new units coming out of the market. So we're not seeing an influx of new listings compared to last year either. And then when we look at new escrows, shocking news, that is also not the same as it was last year. Why? Because we simply don't have enough homes for people to buy. We don't have enough viable options of homes to purchase. And now if we look at our absorption rate, that basically says close to 90% of the number of things that come out of the market go off the market under contract. So again, we're just not seeing these absorption rates drop, which is usually what you see when you see kind of flagging demand, when you see that supply demand relationship changing, and we're not seeing it change despite the fact that homes get more expensive to buy in terms of payment every single week. Now, if you look at our closed prices, again, remember that this is taking a look in the rearview mirror. These graphs are not perfectly smooth. You kind of have to draw your trend lines here. Our trend lines are still positive, right, since the beginning of the year in terms of pricing. Pricing is still, I think, overall going up, even if this past week some of our closings would suggest otherwise. And now if we look at another sort of measure of that supply-demand balance, we look at how many homes are still active after 14 days on the market. And what we're seeing is we're seeing these numbers, remember, lower is a more competitive market. We're still seeing these numbers be lower than, frankly, they have been, and lower than they were, through much of last year, even if they are a little bit higher, especially in that under 1 million category, than they were at this point last year. Remember that under 1 million category because we have some interesting news to talk about there. And that's on this close to list ratio. And if you look at this chart over time, what you see is that for the most part of the last year, these have generally moved together. People have been paying a similar amount over list price on average for homes, whether they're in an more entry level price range or in that $1 to $2 million price range. But look what happens starting this year. We really started to see a divergence, and look at what's happening. These under 1 million, which we're going to call entry level properties, right? These have kind of flattened out around this 104%, which is still an insane number, right? Like, do not get me wrong, 104% is still a very big number, but look what's happened in that 1 to 2 million category. It has just gone wild. And I think this tells you the difference in the mentality. I think at this low end, the effect that we are seeing is that there is some actual affordability pressure, meaning you are seeing buyers actually start to get priced out or be priced out of overbidding, rather. These buyers, if they go to look at a $900,000 house, they can't afford to write $1 million offer. They might be able to go to 940, but they can't go to $1 million, and they're not looking at those homes. And so what we're seeing is a little bit of a different sense of buyer mentality on this at the lower end of the market versus the upper end of the market. I'm actually fascinated by that. It's interesting because the jumbo loan market is still up, but jumbo loans are actually lower than conforming 30-year fixed rates right now. And that might have something to do with this difference in bidding practice. Also, when we look at this days on market for new contracts, we are still below 20 days. We are at a more competitive position than we were at a year ago. And I think it's important to take note on that. For those of you thinking that this market is getting substantially less competitive, it might be getting a little bit easier, but it's not getting easier enough to avoid multiple bids and homes that go under contract quickly. Finally, let's talk about inflation for a second and what that means in terms of payment. So one of the charts we've been super fond of using is sort of this indexed home price, meaning we take the payment on a median priced home and we have tracked that versus June of 2018. So June of 2018 is 100 on our scale, and anything as it goes up is over 100. So you can make a reference and say, well, if it's at 110, that means it's 10% higher than it was in June of 2018. We've used that graph for a while, but what we've added to that is an indexed appraisal or an indexed inflation trend line. So what you can see here is an inflation trend line, and they both start off at the same point. So fascinatingly enough, through about March of 2021, inflation actually moved faster than the payment on a single family on the median priced home. So the blue line is our payment index, and the red line here is our CPI index. So until about early March of 2021, home prices and payments actually had not kept up with inflation. Then you saw that number exceed and go up kind of through 2021. Inflation caught up a little bit, and you actually saw them very closely related until we started getting to the end of the year. And then you see it raised, and then it's kind of gone up. Now, you'll notice the red line doesn't extend through March here. We don't have the inflation numbers for March yet. Those are released on April 12th. So obviously, when those are released, we will add that data to our graph. So you can see, my guess is it will be stair-stepping up. But what's interesting about this graph is that at any point in time, you can see sort of the real price appreciation. What do I mean by that? Is if you strip away the inflation component, are homes getting more expensive? Now, I will tell you that historically, meaning over the past 40 years, the payment on a median priced home has exceeded regular inflation. Real estate has become more scarce in California, and that has resulted in home appreciation or payment appreciation occurring at a rate faster than inflation overall. So we do expect, it's not unusual to see this outpace the inflation, but what you see happening right here since the beginning of the year, I mean, this plain and simple is interest rates. And this gets back to that conversation that we had at the beginning about price inelasticity. So you might be thinking, well, why aren't home prices coming down to counteract those rising payments, to bring them closer in line with inflation? And the reason you're not seeing that is a couple. Number one, home prices move a lot more slowly than inflation does. In general, I shouldn't say they move more slowly. I will tell you that home prices react more slowly to sort of the demand equation. When the payment goes up, you would expect price to go down to counteract that. That movement occurs slowly. There's also, I think, a built-in element of the market thinking, well, maybe these interest rate spikes are not permanent, right? Maybe these spikes in 12 months will start to come back down. And they'll start to come back down on their own, and it'll bring this payment more in line. The other problem we have is, as I mentioned, we have a certain need of housing, right? We have a certain number of units of housing that we need, right? And just like consumption of gasoline, while that need can change, it can't change very quickly. And because of that, you're going to see that the market is going to kind of absorb these interest rate increases, right? It's not going to react immediately. And even if they level off, right, which we assume, remember, inflation will probably keep going for a while and bring this closer in line and alleviate some of that pressure for that to change. That's why you don't really see anybody except kind of clickbaiters predicting some kind of massive housing drop. So if you look, if we draw this little trend line up here, where are we at right now today? Well, home prices have probably moved payments have moved 20% over where they should be regarding inflation. But remember, even a 1% decrease in interest rates would probably start to bring us back in line to kind of this zone that we've seen here, where in general it's about 10, 15% higher than you would see. So interesting stuff. Kind of glad we added this. Gives us a chance to kind of track these two. As I say this, I'd really like to add median rent on single family homes as well, so we can track that rental payment along with this and see how is that doing compared to both inflation and compared to our purchase payment scenario. That might also tell us a little bit about the market. So yeah, I think we might add that one for you next week and add yet another piece of data on here. Anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching so much. We love having you comment, like. Do not forget to hit subscribe and hit that notification bell. Of course, as always, if you would like to be on the receiving end of some of our expertise, if you're looking to buy or sell real estate in Southern California, we would love to help you. Definitely reach out to us. We also have a link down there for a no cost, no obligation 15-minute consultation. We love doing those. It's a chance for you to ask questions and learn a lot in a very low pressure environment. So once again, thanks for watching. We'll see you again real soon.